Hey everybody, it's Mike Frieder here with On-Call Compliance Solutions, and I'm back with another compliance tip of the week. Today we're talking about DFARS, NIST SP 800-171, and CMMC, the physical security, cameras, barrier gates, logs, and locked doors. Oh my, time to talk about physical security and NIST SP 800-171. So hey, if you're a defense contractor who's feeling overwhelmed, tired, and alone, trying to understand all this DFARS, NIST SP 800-171, and CMMC compliance stuff, I've got great news for you. You found your home here at On-Call Compliance Solutions, where we can help you transform into your company's on-call compliance hero. Let's jump into it. So, you guys, this week we're talking about NIST SP 800-171 and the requirements for physical premise security, and what you must know in order to get compliant, because there's a lot to this. Now, we're going to do a great job here of simplifying this for you, but understand physical security is a really big deal. It's got its own control families. This is not just an IT problem, and this is definitely a time to start involving any kind of facilities people that may be in your business taking care of the building. Now, if you're a small business, obviously it might not be a facilities person, but either way, somebody has to be in charge of the actual physical premise. Now, if you're a virtual environment, hey, you know what? You may be either not applicable in a lot of cases, or meeting these controls may be very, very simple. But again, assuming that you are a typical mid to large size business with a building, this is for you. First thing is to understand when it comes to physical security is that this is something that encompasses an entire control family. All right, control family 3.10, which is physical security. That means that for the most part, this entire control family is really not going to be IT related, although IT certainly plays a role in how a lot of physical security controls are implemented these days, right? Like our door access control system is run off of computers. So a lot of times IT people do have a hand in it, but again, not necessarily a bunch of IT controls. It's another case where IT has a mistaken identity of being responsible for something, in this case, physical security, that they really maybe shouldn't be in charge of. But either way, let's plow through. So work our way through some important controls here. So first, 3.10.1 is a requirement that we limit physical access to organizational systems, equipment, and the respective operating environment to authorized individuals. So nobody is allowed in the facility unless they are escorted if they are not an authorized person. It's really important to understand. I've seen so many examples where people like delivery drivers, tooling vendors, just randomly walking about the facility and have plenty of access. Well, that's not really okay. What is critical to understand is that most facilities start out pretty open, okay? You can always walk in the front door. Many times we see open bay doors in the back for manufacturing facilities. And it's just not really built to be secure in a lot of ways. Again, these are private companies, right? So you're a private company, you're not sort of building your building with defense in mind, at least not the first time around. So we have to add things like security walls and door access systems to be sure that a person cannot just sort of walk in and have access to the building, okay? That's really the mindset we want to carry through with this exercise is people shouldn't just be able to kind of walk in and get access to defense information. Now, obviously you can do this with door locks, but in most larger buildings, you're going to need a door access system, typically using a card swipe or a key fob. Some of the later buildings are kind of even sort of integrating biometrics, fingerprint readers and things like that on the server rooms. These devices should be individually assigned and traceable back to who owns them. And a log from the system should be kept as to who is responsible for that device. I think that's very important. It's not good enough to just sort of have a lock and key. You got to know who's got the key. Now, what door they went through, when they went through that door, those are important things to know. This gives traceability, which is a critical step in security. You got to know who did the crime. Now, before we move on, we have to talk about enclaves, okay? I know, I love to talk about enclaves because they save you money. Because not every building has to be entirely compliant. It may just be a specific area where CUI is being worked with, so it's important to focus on wherever that is and control access using one of these methods. Now, not everybody can enclave, so in a lot of cases we do have to secure the whole building, but we want to keep that in mind. Now, another important control is 3.10.2, which states you must protect and monitor the physical facility and support infrastructure for organizational systems. A lot to unpack there. So now we have to both protect and we have to monitor. How do we do this? So, well, monitoring is a little bit of a trickier part. Physically protecting, I think, is pretty obvious, but the monitoring part, how do we monitor? Well, monitoring can only happen in a few ways. Primarily, I will tell you, most companies out there watching this video will be monitoring via a camera system. Okay, you probably, in most cases, don't have a full-time security group with your company. If you're a larger enterprise, you know what? We deal with full-time security groups all the time, and they have things like foot patrols. They have, random sort of patrols, etc. that can do this. But ultimately, a camera system is a necessary part to monitor the facility. With a camera system in place, you can then watch over the entrances and exits to whatever the perimeter is for where secure information is in your building. Thankfully, camera systems are pretty cheap these days, making this much easier to implement. What about the support infrastructure and what is support infrastructure, right? Those are pretty generic terms, support and infrastructure. So, support infrastructure is that infrastructure that supports the security and operation of the system containing CUI. So, think server rooms and security sensitive areas. That is going to be the minimum area you will be required to monitor. So, again, think about it like this. If there's a unique area like a server room that's going to contain a lot of CUI or really any CUI, and not everyone in the office should have access to it or the building, well, then that's a security sensitive area and therefore you're required to monitor it. Again, I don't want to take you super overboard on this. We don't have to monitor every square inch of the facility, but we do have to have enough going on with monitoring that we can adequately figure out if something happened to CUI, well, who did it? Now, what about unique areas such as open yards and manufacturing areas? Well, those areas need to be controlled. So think man gates, scissor gates for open bay doors, and even potentially just being human monitored, right? Training your people and actually having written documentation approved to an assessor that your people are trained in recognizing indicators of threat from outside. All of these are ways to secure large areas or open areas. Scissor gates are one of my favorites because they allow for those big bay doors to be secured while still remaining open for airflow, especially during good weather, even when the weather is nice. Gates are there to secure the entire property from being entered by a non-authorized individual. If you have a gated perimeter, that's phenomenal. Hey, that's how our military secures most of its bases, is with a secure perimeter. So keep in mind that a security gate could also be your perimeter as well. Now, let's talk about visitors for a second, right? We have to escort them. Okay, this is a golden rule of NIST SP 800-171. There's an entire control dedicated to it. If there's a visitor in your building, they have to be escorted, unless they're an authorized individual, and then, well, they wouldn't be a visitor. Contractors fall into the same category. If you have a contractor and they sign policies stating that they will report cyber incidents and that they will do all the things necessary in order for them to be an authorized user of the facility, not a visitor, and they understand what's required of NIST SP 800-171, which can be done in a contractor policy. We actually have written one of those for many of our clients. Ultimately, that's the way to get that done. But again, they have to be operating under one of the policies, informing them of the rules they must operate under while within the premise. Period. All right, it's end of story. If you've got visitors, if you've got a situation like a delivery driver that can just sort of come in the back and walk around the facility, use the bathroom, that's not okay. And it's really important to understand that. So again, speaking of visitors, we are also required to keep audit logs of that physical access for both authorized and visitors. Okay, so keep in mind your door swipe, key fob system; those things should be tracking how the visitors are moving in the facility. But then, with your visitors, they're going to need to sign a visitor log, and somebody's got to audit that every month or two. Now, how do we do this? There's a few ways, which include the visitor log, which just talked about, which is usually manual, but fancier automated kiosks are available, and they're actually really cheap these days. The audit log's coming from our door access system as well. Okay, that's a way to sort of have it automated, so all you have to do is pull the log and look at it once a month or so. So yes, it is mandatory to not have an audit trail of who came and went, but to also be able to recall that activity that happens within the building. Okay, you got to know what's happening inside of your facilities. That's the law, right? That's the rules with NIST SP 800-171. There's no real way around that. Now, what about managing the physical key fobs, the swipe cards, right? Because we've got to actually have a mechanism for managing all these key fobs and swipes and keys and things like that. Again, who's going to keep track of the physical access devices? Well, it turns out that, we actually have to keep and log an inventory of those devices and who has them. It really makes a lot of sense, actually. How else would we know if a device has been lost that we need to deactivate it and who has that device? Surprisingly, so many companies just don't do this. Finally, Control 3.10.6 reminds us that when our team works at alternate work sites, they need the ability to have controls on them anywhere they may work. This control is often met through a combination of personnel policies dictating acceptable behavior and technical solutions to enforce the security, as examples are multi-factor authentication and the use of company VPNs to secure the connection. Locking mechanisms required for physical CUI, such as locking briefcases and encrypted thumb drives, are another example of gaining control and security over CUI when you have team members that are working at alternate work sites. Again, don't forget about alternate work sites. I will tell you that we create an alternate work site policy for every client that we work with so that they can have it documented what the behavior needs to be when you're handling CUI outside of the office. Now, if you are in the middle of your compliance journey and you are trying to figure out how to deal with all these physical security requirements, I have great news for you, because at On Call, we take defense contractors just like you who have had this DFARS, NIST, CMMC, ITAR, and EAR information security compliance stuff dropped in their laps like a seagull on a sunny day. And we teach you how to level up and be a proper on-call compliance hero for your company, eliminating those gaps, gray areas, and getting this solved, all while showing you how to leverage compliance as your secret weapon to land more defense work with higher profit margins. Now that's what becoming an on-call compliance hero can do for you. And if you're looking for more help getting compliant, our compliance experts are always on call for you. Just go visit CMMCComplianceSecrets.com. It's one of my favorite websites on the internet. You bet it. CMMCComplianceSecrets.com, or check out the description below for links to get help right now. And if you love the content we're putting out here for you, help us out with a big thumbs up on that like button, or even better, smash the subscribe button to get the latest compliance content as soon as our compliance nerds roll it out. Until the next compliance tip, my friends, stay safe and secure out there, and hit us in the comments below to let us know what you'd like to know more about when it comes to information, security, and compliance. And I'll see you on the next one.